Hi guys, my name is Kirsty and welcome back to Upside Down Books, and welcome back indeed because it has been a long time since I've had the chance to film. In my last video I had alluded to the fact that I was going to be really busy coming up, and that was no lie, I just didn't realise how busy. And I will say that I am wearing something different right now because, as luck would have it, for the first time in months when I had time to sit down and film, my audio did not work, my microphone glitched, and so I'm having to refilm just the first part of this video, so I will swap over to the original footage once we get past the first few books, so don't mind me, just, you know, a bit of a bumpy start coming back in. But it's been really busy because the exciting news is that Chris and I have moved in together and we've been moving into a new house, which is really exciting. So this is a new place, new library, and it is indeed called the library, which is really exciting, and I'm really hoping that I will be able to do some form of a library tour. I would do a bookshelf tour, but I am somewhat loath to take off every single book on the shelf, so I'm gonna have a think on that one, but I will get something to you soon-ish. But today I thought it would be nice to come back into things by doing a bit of a recent reads recap. Obviously I haven't checked in with you for a good handful of months, including May, which was my birthday month, and it also means we've missed a small smattering of some of my exciting annual challenges, May being the one where I not only did my usual challenge of reading the books that I got as gifts on my previous birthday that I had not read yet, but pulling double duty and starting to go through the ones I got for my birthday this year. Now, I will be going into an array of book hauls in the future, not today, but we will obviously be able to dissect and go through what I did get, because that's always exciting to do that book haul, and it was a good one. But for now, let's just dive into the recent reads, and I'm going to catch you up with all of the great things that I've been reading. The first book was Only Mostly Devastated. This was from my friend Sarah, so thank you very much, Sarah, for gifting this to me because I loved it. This is a queer contemporary YA novel, loosely based off as a Grease retelling, the movie of course, and I found it very entertaining. It was a page turner, it was adorable, it had all of the sexual tension you could possibly want from a romance novel, and I can't recommend it enough. This definitely rivaled some of my favourites that Becky Albertalli has written, and more on her later, but this was just really, really adorable. It's sort of a summer romance vibe, and it has that really wonderful tension of that you often get in queer novels where someone might not be out, or there's some tension around being openly together or interested in someone because of a number of different reasons. And so this was just absolutely chock-a-block full of really emotional content as well as lovely tension between the two guys, and I loved all the new friendships that were explored. The new character moves to a new school and he's had a bit of a summer fling, and little does he know that that fling happens to go to that school. And of course there's so much drama that it follows from there, so I can't recommend this one enough. This was 5 stars for me and I loved it. Will be looking out for other things by this author. The next book I was really excited and anxious to read because of the author, and that is Ice Wolves by Amy Kaufman. This was given to me by my friend Amy, and thank you very much because it has sent me back on the right path with Amy Kaufman. So I have previously read a couple of the co-authored books that Kaufman has done, like Unearthed and Aurora Rising, and not really got along with any of them, even though some of those are some of the most popular books out there. They just weren't my cup of tea, but I really wanted to try her writing by herself, and I'm so glad that I did. Again, stay tuned to hear more about Amy Kaufman. A little bit of a wink as to what's coming next. But this is her middle grade fantasy series. It's a trilogy, and it's set in a fantasy realm where some people, their lineage means that they can transform around the age of 12 either into an ice wolf or a scorched dragon, literally into wolves or dragons. And the two main characters are street urchins, they're orphans, they don't know their parentage, and they're just trying to get by, and after a series of things that happen right at the beginning, they do manifest, and one of them turns into a dragon and one into a wolf. And so this whole plot is about why that happens, them not understanding how. They've been told their whole lives that if you're from the same family, it'll only be one, you can only be a wolf or a dragon, the lines never mix. So they're questioning their heritage. Are they really siblings? Is there something they're not being told? There's loads of mystery and intrigue, and it's got the right level of adventure and paciness that you want from a middle grade story. So I loved this, and it was so easy to read and just get through, and I'm really looking forward to continuing the series to find out where things go. Lots of unexpected twists happening along the way, and it has almost those magic school vibes as well, because the main character that we follow is the brother, and we follow him through the academy for the wolves, as that is what he turns into throughout a lot of the story. And I think that kind of Hogwarts setting is always just really appealing in fantasy novels. So again, 5 stars from me. The next book I picked up was one of my audiobooks that I listened to, and it was How to Kill Men and Get Away with It. And this was fascinating. I picked this up because as soon as it was released, I was just totally intrigued by the title and the cover. And it wasn't quite what I was expecting it to be, but I did give it 5 stars because nonetheless, this was a really profound read. In this story, we are following a really rich, wealthy girl who is an influencer and part of a circle of friends who are also incredibly wealthy and living very privileged lives. The main themes of this book are feminist, with the main attention being drawn to the predatory nature of some men, whether it's through rape or murder or both sort of thing. So it's got some really serious themes. Don't read it if you don't like gruesome murder. Don't read it if you don't want to touch on those themes. Just steer well clear away because it goes in full blown, no curtains drawn. Like, you get to see everything that's going on. It is meant to be funny. It is done in a bit of a tongue-in-cheek way, but it has this undercurrent that I feel the author has left there for you to either pick up and engage with, to have discourse around feminism and the safety of women and women's rights, or you could just enjoy the story for what it is, because it's entertaining seeing this main character who's essentially taken it on herself, as she's a bit lacking in purpose, to go out and eliminate men who are a threat to women and have proved themselves to be so. And it's done in a funny way, but it's obviously serious, and there are some horrifically shocking plot twists that happen that just have really serious consequences. It is such a complicated book. I would love to know if you've read this, because I don't know very many people who have, and I just feel like this book is begging for a book club and a discussion, because it is so goddamn interesting. You will not be able to put it down. It might put you in a funny headspace, but you will read through it so fast. There is nothing like this book. That is everything that I need to recap before I manage to fix my audio for the previous clip, so I'm handing back over to past Kirsty. So the next book I read was The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. Now, this one was a bit of a curveball. It's been sitting on my shelf for a really long time, making me feel guilty that I haven't got to it yet, and Fairy Loot have just done a special edition of the whole trilogy, which I thought I would like to get, but I have been trying to put down some firm rules for myself that I need to read, like book 1 or the book if it's just a single book of these special editions, and decide how much I love them before I go and buy them. Ultimately, I decided with these that I absolutely love the story, but I also think that the paperbacks in and of themselves are stunning enough, so I didn't get the specials. But it did result in the fact that I have now read The Bone Shard Daughter, and I am really glad I did. I have the trilogy. It is located on like a shelf of glory just out of sight here, where I'm showcasing some favourite series, and I'm really looking forward to continuing them. I've got all 3 of them now. This was utterly unique. This has a real interesting atmosphere going for it. It's set in a fantasy world where the magic system is largely powered by the Emperor or those in charge surgically removing a chip of bone, usually from somewhere in the back of the skull, from all of their subjects, and using those to create constructs and use magic with it. It's like really complicated and very uncomfortable, and that is the whole point, because the main character does not have memories. She's got this serious episode of amnesia where you and her are trying to work out who she is, why she doesn't have her memories, and her father, who is the Emperor, is just testing her constantly, and there are loads of keys to the palace, if you will. And as she fulfills his expectations, she's rewarded with a key. It might be to the library, for example, where she can then access that room and try and understand more about her previous life and who she is, and slowly build up a picture. It's an incredibly manipulative relationship, and we sort of enter the story at this point where she's got a few keys and she has like a brother figure of sorts, though there's complications in terms of who he is, but you can read about that. And she's kind of getting fed up with the whole thing, and her memories are not coming back, and for the most part she is faking it. So this is a whole story about her understanding what her father is doing, why she doesn't have memories, how he's controlling his kingdom, and whether that is effective or not. And it is multi-perspective. One of the other perspectives is more of like a wayward soldier slash thief kind of character who ends up in that role and trope we love, where you're kind of like reluctant grumpy man gets saddled with a child, right? And then they have to become like a father figure. There's that sort of vibe going on, but more importantly there's an animal sidekick that's like a really sassy kitten that he gets lumped with, which also has some unique abilities, which I'm not going to spoil you about because it is so much fun to learn about as you're reading. So there is a lot going on. This doesn't look too big, but it is quite a dense read. There's just so much to take in and so much of the world to build up, but it's really wonderful, and I can't wait to see where the rest of the series goes, because the way this finishes was just absolutely epic and leaves so much room for doing bigger and grander things. So I'm looking forward to continuing this, and I do hope that I continue to love it. Again, this was a 5-star read. You're gonna get real sick of me talking about 5-star reads by the end of this video. So the next book, going back onto the bandwagon for birthday reads, is Lifelike by Jay Kristoff. Again, thank you so much, Sarah, for getting me a copy of this. I have been meaning to read more of Jay Kristoff's books for the longest of times, and much to Chris's disappointment, I've still not read the Nevernight series, but I will. I'm getting there. Loved this. 5 stars, powered through it, dystopians, like steampunky vibes, super fun. This was an absolute ripper of a page turner, and I'm pretty convinced that I am actually going to love everything that this man has written, basically. Apart from this and The Empire of the Vampire, I don't think I've read anything else of Jay Kristoff's yet, so I have so much to look forward to. This one is set in the future when the world has just gone to shit because of the basically climate change. Everything's become hot and horrible, and the main character is sort of like a down on her luck, below the poverty line trope, and she is fighting in like fist fights with like these mechanical robots that she builds and like she can be inside of, so like, what are those called? Like a transformer sized sort of thing. And she like works on all of these kind of augmented things, and there's like a whole tier of like human, bionic, and like full robot, and there's like a whole political discussion of who has what rights if you're not fully human, etc, etc, which is really fun. The hardest thing about this book is it wasn't easy to jump in and out of just because there's an extreme amount of slang being used. It's like the main pitfall I find with futuristic dystopians when the author has created like a new version of the English language which includes new slang, as would be appropriate for if you actually imagine that being real. However, as a reader, it takes a little while to get your head around and understand what things mean. But of course, by the end of the book you end up using the slang yourself and it becomes just commonplace. So it is an obstacle that is totally possible to overcome, but to start with it was a little bit of a baptism of fire. But as I said, it was 5 stars. I had no complaints. I was just spellbound by this. It has such an exciting plot. It's bigger than Ben-Hur. You think you're just going to be going through this sort of like almost divergent vibe of a story, and then there's so many layers to it, particularly in terms of, again, the character's identity. This was really interesting reading this alongside the Bone Shard daughter, because I think there's a lot of themes, though they're different genres, that overlap between the two stories. So highly, highly recommend if you are like me and are taking a long time to get through Jay Kristoff's backlist, because this is excellent and well worth the read. The next book I read was Bravely by Maggie Stiefvater. This one was given to me by Wendy. Thank you so much, Wendy. Merida is my favourite Disney character. Brave is my favourite film. I just love it. I am addicted, and I can't believe how long it's actually taken me to pick up this book. I rated this one 4 stars. I thought it was really wonderful. It was such a lovely continuation of Merida's character. It takes place after the events of the Disney film. You don't need to watch the film, but if you haven't seen Brave and you don't want to be spoiled, and I feel like that is probably a very small percentage of people, then I recommend watching the film first. But this was really good. It didn't quite have the most satisfactory ending that I had been wanting. It was a little bit too open-ended for me, and it is like my real personal thing that I have a thing against open endings. I don't like them. So I think that for most people would probably not have an issue with that, and it could have been a 5-star read, but I did really enjoy it. It follows a similar sort of construct where Merida has a problem that she has to overcome, and she has a set amount of time to do so. Very similar to the film, and not in a bad way, just in terms of the general structure of it. And so you get to explore all of the characters from the movie in more depth, and I think that Maggie Stiefvater did a really wonderful job bringing them all to life in a really like honest and true way. Everyone felt the same as they did on screen, and I think that's really impressive to do. So I definitely do recommend this. I think that this was a really, really enjoyable read. Very quick, very light, a good palette refresher between genres for sure. I then read probably one of the strangest memoirs I've ever read, and that is Did I Ever Tell You by Sam Neill. And I had wanted to read this because of my recent obsession with Jurassic Park, and in true fashion for me with many memoirs, I feel like I know one thing that this actor will do, like Miriam Margolyes for example, and it's like the smallest part of their career, and perhaps the part of their career that they wish they weren't known for because they feel like they've done bigger and better things. That is such a trend. And I feel guilty and clearly need to broaden my horizons. But this was really interesting. This is less so a memoir and just a collection of vignettes about Sam's life. It was lovely, it was charming, it was harmless. It had somewhat of a cohesive narrative, but I did struggle at times. It was really just, I think once I just took it for what it was, I was able to just enjoy the experience, and he had some really great stories. Sam Neill has done so much throughout his life, and he's a Kiwi man who's also spent a lot of time in Australia, so it was really nice to read about famous actors from my neck of the woods. I ended up rating it 4 stars. I would recommend it if you like Sam Neill. I would recommend it if you are looking for a really gentle read. This is such a perfect like gift-giving book for just something that is harmless and sweet and quaint. All of those sort of just cozy things. You are not getting any profound snippets of wisdom. You are not going to take away unknown secrets and scandals. This is really just Sam Neill literally being like, oh hey, here's this thing that happened in my life, it was pretty entertaining, and then quite sophisticatedly tying it all together in a way. So this is a really good read, but I don't think it's going to be everyone's cup of tea, I will definitely say that, but as I said, good gift and good for people who enjoy and like Sam Neill. I did the audiobook, he narrates it, it was beautiful and I loved it. I then read what I think will be my favourite book for the year, and that was Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Gamu, and I mean I assume it's pronounced Gamu. Someone can tell me if it's Gamas, but I feel like that's surely not. This has obviously been doing the rounds, has been incredibly popular and famous for what feels like many years, but I know it's really not that old now. This was just shockingly brilliant. I loved this, and Gemma gave me this one. Excellent pick, thank you so much Gemma, I'm so glad to have read it now. I read through this quite quickly, and again, put in front of me a new piece of fiction that has a feminist undertone and I am a happy chappy. If you don't know what this is about, it is following the life of a very intelligent and kind of emotionally detached woman who wants to be a scientist, and it is set during a time when women really have to fight to kind of have equal rights to men, and certainly never really achieve it, as we know. It's one of those things where you can have great empathy reading through it and kind of feeling the frustration and tragedy of how hard she has to work to not like just be seen as a woman first rather than what she can do, and it has so many interesting like intersections in terms of how she navigates relationships, particularly when being in a relationship with someone might then take away the legitimacy and authenticity of her work, because people just assume that that man in her life is actually doing the work for her behind the scenes, all that kind of stuff. But the real crux of the story is that she has a child and she never wanted a child, and the way that she parents and the way that she offers life wisdom through what ends up being a TV show, hence the TV here. So she's a scientist first, a chemist first, and she ends up on a cooking show and really brings a heavy theme of chemistry into the show and kind of appeals to women who are also frustratingly trapped within the household and unable to get away from either their life, society's role for them, or from bad husbands. And it was just a beautiful read. It's shocking at times, it's fast paced, and it is unlike anything you will have ever read before, I can guarantee you that. So this is definitely well worth the hype that it's been getting, and of course with 5 stars. I don't think I'm going to read something that's going to top this year. This was just unbelievably clever, and I cannot wait to see what this author writes next. So at this point, that was everything that I managed to read off my birthday TBR from the previous year. It wasn't everything, but it did feel like quite a good dent. It didn't feel like a landslide victory, but that's only because I had so many books to start with to get through, which I knew I was never going to achieve. So on the whole, I thought that that was a really good progress, and this year I then wanted to pull the double duty of, after my birthday, to start immediately reading through the gifts that I was given, and I got quite a few this year. There will be a book haul coming. I have so many books to show you guys. Don't even mention the book buying ban. So we're going to stay tuned because we're going to split it up into multiple videos per theme. But I did get a lot of books on my birthday, and so I've started the effort of going through those. It was supposed to just be for like May to June, but with the house move that slowed me down over the few months, I've sort of just generally made it my goal for the last 6 months of the year, so before Christmas. Before I start my double duty for Christmas this year, and then I will have pivoted those goals to be doing the challenge immediately in the month following rather than 11 months later, as it were. So that meant the next book I read was another Amy Kaufman. So my parents got The Isle of the Gods for me for my birthday, and holy shit, I loved this. Like, if there was going to be a book that would beat Lessons in Chemistry, it would be this one. I enjoyed this immensely. This has got reasonably good reviews from what I've seen amongst friends on the internet and Instagram and all of that jazz, but I feel like I have created my own little fandom of obsession. This was so spectacularly amazing, and I'm gonna overhype it for you now, but this was like everything you want in YA fantasy on the high seas in like a pirate vibe. Like, if you haven't found anything good that has been as good as Trisha Levenseller's Daughter of the Pirate King, then like this is it. I am so excited about this book, and I can't believe I have to wait so long for the next installment. This has some great angsty romance. It has lovely vibes of enemies to lovers. It's got great sibling relationships. It's got loyalty, on to the nth degree within friendships. It's got loads and loads of complex character dynamics going in it, which is just in such an abundance in a way that you don't usually get in YA. And I think the plot itself was really, really exciting because you've got this aspect of being on the seas, trying to complete this impossible mission, trying to do it in secret, trying to deceive people, trying to get along, and just and of course there's like a nerdy book character who's completely ill-fitted to the whole task, who's tagging along the whole time too, and that always makes things extra enjoyable. So I cannot recommend this enough. 5 stars, 10 million stars. I love it. I'm so obsessed. This absolutely sealed the deal for me about Amy Kaufman, and I have decided that it was just actually an unfortunate coincidence in terms of me not liking some of her previous collabs, but this was brilliant, and this is her debut YA novel. So she's only written, like, by herself. She's only written the collabs before, and she's only written middle grade. This is the first time it's YA on her own. So that's really exciting for her. Australian author, so props to her. But please go and pick this book up and read it so that you can be excited with me about it, because I don't know how I'm going to survive till like next year when book 2 comes out. I then slipped in a little read of non-fiction, which is called The Voice to Parliament Handbook. And this is relating to a referendum that is coming up in Australia, relating to how First Nations people in Australia will be represented in the Constitution going forward. It's a whole political thing that I'm not going to get into here because it's not relevant or you're not interested, but there is this little book, it's very short, that is explaining why you should vote yes or no, etc. And that was really great. So I'm not really going to rate this one on here because that's not really what it's about, but I did read it. I thought it was incredibly informative, and I did learn things that I was quite surprised to realise I didn't know. So if you're a fellow Australian and you don't really know the ins and outs of all of this and the importance of it, then I do recommend going and getting a copy of it and borrowing it from someone so that you can find out more. That's all I'm going to say on that one. The next book I have to talk about was actually a review copy because I was naughty and requested a few review copies from Hachette recently, and that was The Witching Tide by Margaret Meyer. Now, this was not quite what I was expecting, but I nonetheless enjoyed it because guess what? It's historical literary feminist fiction. And we all know I like that stuff. This one is set during 1645, somewhere around there, and it's about legitimate witch hunts. It's got a bit of a magical realist or realism spin to it, if you will, which again as a genre I usually quite heavily avoid. However, I thought this was done very well. This did something that there are few historical books that do it as profoundly as this did. There was a dedication at the beginning of this that says, "For the women who fell victim to the 1645 to 1647 East Anglian witch hunt, in these pages you are remembered." And I just felt like that really set the emotional tone of the book to be like, this is not just a story, this is not just a book, but this is a work of love and dedication from the author to remember unremembered women who have suffered at the hands of such extreme misogyny that spread like wildfire throughout society, and there's something incredibly profound about that. So this follows an older woman for the time, she's middle-aged, not that old really, who is a midwife, and the way that she has to dance for her life to avoid being swept up in the witch hunt, just because of the way that women could often, you know, if something went wrong in a birth and how easily it would be pinned on the midwife, that sort of thing. If you like historical fiction, I do recommend reading this. I think it's amazing. If you like feminist fiction, definitely read this one. And if you are a literary reader, then this is 100% up your alley. If you like the more commercial historical fiction, this might be too dense and too serious for you. There's a lot going on, but I do think that this was really, really impressive. And I would certainly be so excited to read more by Margaret Meyer because this was really profound. It has left its mark on me, and it's something that I keep coming back to and thinking about having finished it. So 5 stars from me. Thank you very much to Hachette for sending this to me, and it is out. It came out in the beginning of July, I believe. I have no idea what month it is anymore, but yes, the beginning of this month. The next book I finished was an audiobook, and it was The King's Secret by Pedro Urvi. This is book 2 in the Path of the Ranger, which is a real unexpected treasure find of mine on Audible, because I have been doing the audiobook, which is narrated brilliantly, that I didn't know about before. I mean, I love Ranger's Apprentice, many of us do, and if you do, then please pick this book up because you'll love it. It's like a 15-17 book long series. It's epic. You'll be able to stay with it forever. And I'm just loving it. This is a real Ranger's Apprentice vibe. So you've got a young orphan kid whose family legacy has made his life really difficult because his father is considered a traitor. So book 1 explores him going through the trials of becoming a ranger, which is sort of like the quiet secret assassins of the king's forces. And it's set in like a medieval epic fantasy world, and it's all about him trying to clear his father's name. And obviously as the series goes on, that plot changes, so I won't talk too much about what the King's Secret is about, but this was again 5 stars for me, just absolutely no complaints. I'm loving it, and I have already got book 3 lined up on Audible and ready to go. I then DNF'd a book, and shockingly it was a Fiona McIntosh book. So I started reading The Tapestry because it was part of Prime Reading on Amazon, which I did like a free trial for, which I don't have anymore, but during that time I read a few books and this was one of them. I got nearly 50% of the way through and I was just bored to tears. It was a very unsophisticated version of Outlander, is the easiest way to sum it up. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't take it seriously. I thought the character development was poor and the plot was quite bizarre. It starts in modern day London and you've got this sort of woman who's engaged to be married to this really exuberant American guy, but she's constantly questioning whether she's actually in love with him, and he has some accident and she ends up back in time. I won't go too far into the story, but it was weird, and it was just a weird motivation. And considering I've been reading Outlander recently, I just found this so hard, so I gave up and I put it down. And so that is the first Fiona McIntosh I have DNF'd in my life, which was a real shock to the system. The next book I read was a birthday book from this year from my brother, and that is Evergreen, which is an environmental non-fiction book. This one is about megaforests, if you couldn't tell from this stunning cover. This was a delight to read. I like my non-fiction and my environmental non-fiction in particular. This had some really fun maps as well. I'll try and find one. They had like double page spreads of maps so that you could see the areas that they were talking about. And this book is all about the megaforests throughout the world, of which there are 5, and that is in Russia, Canada, Papua New Guinea, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and the Amazon. Just that small thing. And so it's going through what defines a megaforest, what their ecological purpose is, how it impacts climate change, and where definitions of megaforests or particular intact forest landscapes, that is a real definition that they talk about a lot, where that kind of definition is helpful and where it is sort of a little bit arbitrary and not serving the purposes. So if you're really interested in trees like I am, then I highly recommend putting this one on your list. Very easy to read, lots of lovely graphics and images throughout, and it was so informative and I learned so much. It had a lot of interesting stuff about Indigenous land management as well, which is of particular interest to me because this is something that we talk about in Australia a lot, but obviously there are no megaforests in Australia, as being mostly desert in the middle, so not really enough land for that, but there were still many themes that were relevant, so I really enjoyed this one. 5 stars, nothing to complain about, loved it. Then from my sister I got Imogen obviously this year, and this is a Becky Albertalli book. It's her newest one. I read it, I loved it. It was probably my favourite I've read by her. 5 stars. This one had the most interesting plot concept that I think Becky Albertalli has done so far. So in each of her books there is some different identity or definition of queer identity explored in her book, and this one is actually looking at heterosexuality and being an ally. And I'm not going to go too far into it, but the essential plot is that the main character is surrounded by a lot of queer women and she considers herself to be a really strong ally, but she is absolutely riddled with anxiety of getting it wrong, of overstepping, of making spaces unsafe because she is considered so supremely straight. And right at the beginning when the story is kicking off, her friend makes a little white lie because of various reasons, one of her best friends, and says that they used to date, and the assumption that she is bi goes around, and it really starts her down the path of questioning how straight she really is. And that is the whole thing that you're exploring in this book, of being an ally and being confused when you're surrounded by so much queerness in your own life. It was so complex and amazing. It was stressful. I was reading it with every spare second I had. I didn't put this book down. I can't recommend it enough. If you like Becky Albertalli, read this book. If you like queer fiction, read this book. If you like contemporary romances, then goddamn read this book because it's so good. Can't recommend enough. And that brings me to the final book that I have read since we last spoke, and that is The Housekeepers by Alex Haye. So this was another review copy from Hachette. Thank you very much to them. This came out just the other week, so it's just hit shelves. You should be seeing it everywhere, and it is an upstairs, downstairs mystery drama, and it is so much fun. I've basically been saying that if Agatha Christie wrote Downton Abbey, this would be the book. It is all about some disgruntled women downstairs who take it upon themselves to exact revenge against this grievance that has been done to them, and they band together to pull off one of the most extraordinary heists I have ever read. It was sometimes hard to just go with the believability of the plot, and I do think that there were so many subplots in terms of how the women were related or not to each other or to the household, was possibly just like overcomplicating things, but on the whole I thought this was fabulous. It was very easy to read, and it was a perfect book to be reading when I was in the thick of moving and just really tired and not having much time to read, because it was so easy to pick up and then like not read for a week and come back to and remember where you were. It was just one of those really easy books like that. This ended up being a 4-star read for me, and it has a lovely sense of drama and tension as the chapter titles sort of count down until the ball, which is when they are going to execute this heist. And I mean, what more could you want? It's sort of like, we all love a good heist novel, and then you put it in a Downton Abbey-esque vibe and you get good times, that's all I can say. So I do recommend this to people who like their sort of gentle, soft, cozy crime, particularly those of the British variety, because this is definitely something that you will enjoy. So there we have it. Those are the books that I have read recently. I am hoping to have some consistent time to film and chat with you guys going forward. As I mentioned, there's going to be a bunch of book hauls coming up, and possibly some discussions about TBRs, but there's going to be so many book hauls in different categories, probably by genre, that I'm not going to start telling you which ones are coming first, because who knows, and this video's been long enough. So let me know in the comments down below what you've been reading during these last few months. I would love to know, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.